Good evening, everyone. Can I have your attention, please? We'd like to get started. There are still plenty of seats in the front row. If anybody wants to sit down and take up some room in the front. So thank you very much for everyone for coming out this evening. It's very, very heartwarming to see everybody here to discuss and make your opinions known on this extremely important question. So the original format was to have these boards up and about so that people could mingle and have questions to any of the councillors or to myself. And we had a great number of people this afternoon, close to 100 people. Didn't seem to work that well. So what we've done, we're going to change it up a little bit. And so we're going to have the same information, but we're going to do it as a kind of a formal presentation. Then after that, we'll open up the floor for anybody that wants to come up, give a statement, make a presentation, whatever their feelings are, so that we have an opportunity. And this evening is all about us listening to you on what you think of the habitat, and so on and so forth. So it is a listening opportunity for us. It's not a debate opportunity, because we'll have plenty of those moving forward. And what's going to happen is at our next council meeting on Tuesday, the 26th, the council is going to have an open discussion on what they've heard. They're not going to make any decisions. We're going to have an open discussion of what we've heard, all the feedback that we've been getting, and the feedback is not, by all means, won't be closed after the 26th, but kind of what we've heard, and are there any options? We've heard a few options this afternoon, great options. We'll put them on the table and have a frank discussion. Then we'll go away, get some more information, and disseminate what we've heard and what are possible options. Then come December 10th, the plan is to have a vote on it. That may or may not happen. There may be a new option that comes out that needs more information, need to explore more. But we do have time. Is it of the essence? It's all about budgeting for 2020, and so we need to have all of that information as quickly as possible. But we can't make a hasty decision, so we'll take the time that is required. So basically, that's kind of how we see this evening develop. And moving forward, the next couple of meetings, council meetings, there'll be some open dialogue in an open session, not in a closed session, so that people can be heard and hopefully listened to. And that's what this is all about. It's all about listening. So I'll ask our CAO, Darren Ottaway, to go through the presentation. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for coming this evening. It's a privilege to get to know a lot of the folks in the community, because I'm brand new. And again, my name is Darren. I'm the new CAO for the town of Cochrane, and it's a great pleasure to be here. I appreciate everyone's attendance this evening, and I appreciate all the different points of view that we're having as a community. I think it's incredibly important that a healthy community comes together in hard times and has constructive conversations about what to do, and I think this is evidence of what a healthy community we have, and the fact that we can come together and have a free exchange of ideas and have a discussion about tough questions that faces us as a town and the challenges that we have moving forward, as the mayor has mentioned. My role this evening, I've been asked at the last, a little bit at the last minute to just run through the slides that are the boards here. So my job this evening is going to be just to walk you through those. And after that point, then there will be the opportunity. We have the speakers list here, and then folks can come up and say their thoughts on the subject at hand. So the first panel that we have this evening is relation to the question that's being asked of the public, and the question being asked is, can the taxpayers of Cochrane afford to continue funding the rising cost of the polar bear habitat? And the issue before the town is that the rising costs of the polar bear habitat. So it's not a question of whether or not we like the whole polar bear habitat. It's not a question of about whether or not we appreciate it, or if we are disputing whether or not it is a great facility. I think everybody here is in agreement that it is. The question that we have tonight is, how are we going to pay for it as a town and as a community? So when we look at how it all started, I'm not going to go through the history because you folks have lived it. Many of you have been here all your lives and you know the history of it. But very quickly, the idea of the polar bear habitat came as a result of a desire of folks in the community to try and help stimulate some economic activity. And it was a very noble cause to say, let's get together and put together a tourism attraction that will attract people to stay in our town a little bit longer than they currently do. And this was predicated a lot on the passenger service that was coming from Toronto and then coming to Cochrane, and then on to Cochrane to Moosonee as part of what we know as the Polar Bear Express. This whole idea back in 2002 was to create a self-funding, not-for-profit operation. And at that time, the community had something called the Community Development Corporation. The Community Development Corporation was the ones that took the lead and were the ones that were actually instrumental in starting the polar bear habitat. And they were the ones that were in control of the polar bear habitat as far as its operations go. So they were the folks that were responsible. Sorry, for some reason I'm on a timer here, so it's going faster than I can talk. So when we look at how it started, the original grant, the original facility budget was just a little over $4.6 million. It was operated by the CDC, and the town assumed the responsibility for the habitat in 2012. So that was a bit of a change in 2012. Before, it was completely autonomous, and then at 2012, the CDC said, for whatever reason, this is now going to be a town operation. The town agreed. The town took control operationally of the habitat, and from 2012 until current day, the town has been responsible for the operation of the facility. The CDC was subsequently dissolved completely from the community in 2015, so the idea about having a separate a separate corporation to look after this, that vehicle now is gone. It's no longer in existence. So the cost to the taxpayer back in 2013 was, so when it transferred to the town, the taxpayer's responsibility was a total of $313,000, a few cents. And then by 2019, that amount had risen, and this is the taxpayer's contribution, not the overall budget, that had risen to $410,000, and that's where we stand today with the $410,000 deficit. So that's money that has to come from the tax base in order to keep things running the way they're currently running. So the other part of this dynamic was that, as we're also aware, that the part of the business case and the business plan was to capitalize on tourists coming in on the train, and that Polar Bear Express and the passenger service, we know that that was also disbanded back in 2012, I believe, and that had a significant impact on the amount of tourists that came to Cochrane, and it cut the numbers by, I don't have it off the top of my head, but I believe it was in the order of at least half to 3/4 of the tourists that were coming were suddenly disappeared because that passenger service was canceled. So then the next one. Good. So this brings us forward so that we have a bit of a picture of what the plan was in 2002. when it was started. We know that it changed hands in 2012 and that we are now obviously heading and looking at to 2020. So the next panel with regards to 2020 shows the increases of the revenue and the net costs of the polar bear habitat. So what you'll see on some of the panels are these graphs and charts, and what you'll see is the information that has made those charts is from the audited financial statements of the town. So we can see that in 2019 and on average for the past 3 years, the deficit or the net cost to the public has been in the order of about $400,000 on average. So we know that that's what we're currently paying. And that graph that you see there represents that in a visual form, so you can take a look and see how those numbers have progressed over the years. So this is where we really get into some of the discussion points that are important for this evening and for the future of the habitat, and this is the future and the operating costs. So we know now that we're paying, all of you are contributing for a total of $400,000. However, we know we're going to be facing some unavoidable increases in 2020, and I think this is where the conversation really starts to get interesting. What you see on this particular slide is the wage costs, and wage costs for a number of years have remained static, and the reason they've remained static is because the staff at the polar bear habitat are not unionized. They're non-unionized staff, however, they are town employees. So what we have in effect is two different classes of employees. We have unionized employees who receive benefits and all of the protections that a collective agreement brings, negotiating power, etc. And we've got another group of employees in the town who do not have that same opportunity and have been paid less and have not been given the benefits that the rest of the staff has. So in response to that, the polar bear habitat staff has determined that they wish to unionize, and we know as a result of that unionization that we can extrapolate a few things. First of all, we can say that if the collective agreement process was simply to say, in fairness to the employees, that we will give you the same contract that we give the rest of the employees, that would have a net cost of about $900,000. So the difference between today, what we're paying, the wage costs around $400,000 in order to pay them the minimal amount to bring them in line with other staff. You'll see the bar in red, and then if we were to meet and give the staff at the polar bear habitat the same benefits and wage costs that the rest of the employees are awarded, we would be looking at that increase. So the difference between the deficit of $400,000 that we pay today, plus the increase of wage costs, just wage costs, we're looking at a minimum of a $300,000 increase in the taxes that are going to be needed in order to keep the doors open this coming year. And I know there's a lot of talk about strategies on how we can change that, and that's exactly why we're here tonight, is to talk about that reality. So it's not, again, an us versus them. It's a matter of fairness, and it's a matter of treating people properly, and it's a matter of saying that if we're going to employ these folks, we have to treat them the same as everybody else, and that comes with a cost. And in order to achieve that level of fairness and to treat the employees the way that they should be treated, obviously that has a financial implication. So with unionization, this is not the factor for determining what to do, but it is a realistic understanding for everybody in the room to know that the costs are getting more expensive. And it's, again, not anybody's fault. It's not us versus them. It's just the sad reality of the fact that everything gets more expensive in life, and that we either have to raise the money to be able to afford it, or we have to cut services, or we have to do a combination of both. And then there's the opportunities for us as a community to look at other opportunities for revenue generation through grants and other opportunities. So we can start to see the picture forming for the council in 2020 when they look at the budget and say right off the bat, we know we have to budget at least an additional $300,000 on top of the $400,000 deficit that we currently run. So now we're starting to get into some conversations about big numbers. So the next slide is the concept of the research facility, and there's been a lot of discussion about the wonderful opportunities for research that the polar bear habitat could pursue. It's a bit of an interesting story when you go back and look at the history, because again, when we started with the polar bear habitat, it was designed as a tourism opportunity, and now the vision has been to, if we were to proceed as a research facility, the focus would shift away from tourism and be placed on academic research. So there is a bit of a a discussion that would have to be had about the role of the public. If you have a dedicated research facility, are you still going to be allowing people to come in and swim in the pool, or are you going to be allowing tourists to come in and walk around? Are you going to allow camping? There's all those sort of logistical questions involved. But there's also the cost, and we know that to run a good lab and a good scientific research operation, it takes money, and you need the space and the facilities to do that. So there's been a lot of talk about the business study, the HRNA study. The HRNA study is not public at this point, although Council has seen a draft version of that report, and the numbers in that report are calling for approximately $4.5 million investment in order to achieve the research status that is being proposed for the facility. That would give the resources needed in order to become a world-class research center for polar bears, and I suppose climate change as well. So this is the question that is before us now. In order to make this viable, we now need to decide what we're going to become. And there's been discussions about what we are now. There's discussions, and obviously there's the history of what we were. And now there's the question of what we want to become as a polar bear habitat. The other thing that we need to keep in mind is that this is an issue that we've been really looking at in isolation, but we also have to consider the other pressures that are facing us as a community. And this chart, this graph here, tries to explain a little bit about that. And what's important to understand is that we do get penalized if we are a healthy community. And that sounds a little weird, but what is going on with the provincial government is that they are saying to communities, if you want your annual funding, and in the north it's called AMP funding, we've received several $100,000 per year from the government over a number of years as a way to help subsidize northern communities and help reduce the burden on the taxpayers and to help the government's contribution to help stimulate the economy. What's been happening over the past 4 years is an interesting trend where our property values are going up. Although we haven't experienced a lot of growth, the market is strong and houses are selling, and they are selling for higher than what they were originally purchased for, which then increases the value of your overall stock. So as your house price increases in value, you then are also in turn going to have to pay more taxes. So it's a bit of a circular argument of why would I want to do something like put an addition on my house if I'm going to increase the value, because I'm only going to get dinged by having to pay more taxes. But that's the system that we're in, and what the government is saying to us, the provincial government, is that because you are healthy financially and you have the opportunity to raise taxes because your assessed value is healthy and growing, we are now going to cut your subsidy by a significant amount. So not only are we facing the $700,000 of new money that we need in order to keep the place open, we're facing, on the other side of the coin, reductions in money that we already had and were counting on for operating, because the government is now starting to claw that back. So what this graph represents is the amount of money that has been clawed back that we no longer have in our operating budget that we also have to make up, and that reduction alone is a 5% increase in taxes. So to recover the money that the province has taken, we then have to raise the taxes or come up with alternative sources of revenue, and that is the reality of it. So it's important to know that it's not just a question of the impacts financially of the polar bear habitat, it's the overall financial situation the town is in, and all of the factors that go into determining how much revenue we're going to receive on a given year. So again, the provincial government certainly has not done our town many favors by clawing that money back, and it has put us in a more difficult position, and we find ourselves, it gets worse every year. And you can see here that, for example, I think it was around it was about an $84,000 reduction this year again, and I think we're up and around total of $400,000. So that's money taken right out of our operating budget that we have to recover just to remain at status quo. So we have a number of competing priorities. I'm not going to go through those all, but you did hear some discussion today about things like doctor recruitment, incredibly important. If we don't have doctors in our community, we don't have an economy. If we don't have an outstanding educational system, we won't be able to attract people we need into our community. But we've got a lot of other competing interests. And one thing that the town certainly is grappling with is our infrastructure deficit, and that's the amount of money we need to collect in order to replace the infrastructure that we currently have. And in some cases, our infrastructure is not in very good shape. We have lead pipes in the ground in some places. We have roads that are obviously need some help. And we've got a lot of things internal to us that we need to continue to invest in order to keep them in a good operating condition so that we're not stuck with tragic failures in infrastructure like pipes breaking and things that are happening unexpectedly because we haven't been keeping up with our obligations to maintain the infrastructure that we have. So the costs of the infrastructure and the infrastructure maintenance are continuously going up, and the more we defer the obligations we have as a community to invest in that infrastructure, we're basically pushing our debt obligation down the road. And the more we push the capital down the road, the bigger it gets and the harder it is to deal with. So when we wake up one day and we suddenly say, well, we have no doctors, we have a waste disposal site that needs to be retrofitted and expanded. We have a DSAB funding that is being argued amongst the different communities because dollars are so tight that we can't even agree on how we're going to fund this basic social services. We've got economic development demands, and we've got debt servicing. So again, on the debt, I think it's important for the community to understand, and I am going to read this part. I'll just turn around. Debt servicing for the taxes and water sewer was a total of $1 million. So that's the debt servicing with an additional $400,000 of interest, and that's 1 year. So the interest you pay as taxpayers on the debt of the community is about $400,000 a year. And that is a total of interest and principal of $1.4 million. So the total debt of the town at the end of 2019 was $13.5 million. And there's additional $2 million in debt owed by the town's affiliate, Cochrane Telecom Services. So I broke the $2 million out from the telecom, and just so you could see, the municipality alone is $13.5 million in debt. So we also look at rising costs with police and EMS, and we look at housing and homelessness. And there was a study that has been developed for the community, and much surprise to me, being a newcomer, that there is a number of homeless people in our community. So we think we don't have homeless, but we actually do. So these are some of the things that I'm finding out. But these are some of the issues that we are wrestling with as a community. So it's not just the polar bear habitat. There are pressures coming all over the place. And the question that the council is asking is, it's not that we don't love it, we do. But what is your priorities as a community, and what should we be prioritizing? What is the most important things to our public? And that's why we appreciate your input this evening on that. So that concludes my really exciting talk on finances. Maybe somebody could, I think Ryan's here from the Crunch. Nice to see all the guys there. Could you open the bar? Yeah. Okay. So anyways, that concludes my presentation. And again, the question being asked, what advice would you give council with all of the financial things that you've seen this evening? What advice would you give to council about the 2020 budget? So again, it may be a tough conversation to have, and I know that we have a lot of emotion and passion in the room, and that's a good thing. And it is a tough conversation to have, but again, a healthy community has those tough conversations, and they're stronger for it. So thank you very much for your attention. I appreciate it.
So thank you, Darren. So what we'll do is, if anybody that wants to make a statement, make a comment, just come on up and, pardon? Oh, there's a list. Well, whoever's on that list, come on up. By all means, put your name on the list so that as we keep it as in an orderly fashion as possible. And we welcome everyone's input and chatter, and we'll leave it up to you. We'll open it up, and please try to keep it within 5 minutes. As you see, it's a full house, and we'd like to hear from everybody, or as many people as possible. So here we go.
Sorry, I'm really short. Dear council, board members, family, friends, and community members, I'm here to talk about the habitat. I'm a taxpayer in the middle class. Yes, I know, everyone's tired of paying taxes. But in the long run, it will cost us more if the town closes down the habitat. The building could stay empty for who knows how long. If the town needs to restructure the building to accommodate another company or organization, it could cost us millions. I have been talking with people about the habitat. Most of what I'm hearing is very supportive. But I've also heard some negative talk. It's mostly about how much we pay in taxes and why do we need a zoo. I don't think closing the habitat is a good investment. We need to come up with a plan for more government grants and donations from big companies. We need places like our wonderful habitat so we can learn about climate change, saving the animal population. The habitat is not a zoo, but an educational sanctuary for polar bears around the world. Zoos are all about the guest experience. Their enclosures are small, compact, which doesn't allow for the animals to be wild and free. We could use some more education on facilities like our beautiful habitat. Even I thought the habitat was a zoo or a tourist attraction. I was so wrong about the habitat. I now know that we need more places like the habitat to save our endangered animals and all animals. All animals need a place to roam free, be wild. I have never seen or been around polar bears until Dylan showed me our majestic bears and their enclosures. When I volunteered at the habitat this summer, it was amazing to see how big the bears are and their beautiful enclosures with the lake for them to hunt, play, and the ability to roam free. I also got to see how much work goes behind closed doors. It's unbelievable what they do to keep our bears well fed, the visits with the veterinarians, and all the other appointments the bear may need by our amazing zookeepers like Dylan. I couldn't believe how well set up the habitat was with their camera system so that visitors and the public can watch the bears live at any time. It was amazing to learn what they do for our bears. The team works hard to enrich their lives with treats and playtime. It is a gift to have beautiful wild animals like our bears at the habitat. I can't wait to volunteer next summer. I can't wait to learn more about the habitat, the bears in the coming years. I can't believe the opportunities a volunteer can access through the habitat programs. They have had many visitors from around the world like Levi Lavelli and the volunteers from China to come here this summer to help with the habitat. Thank you, everybody.
So, thank you for that. I failed to mention that if you want, like the young lady has a presentation or a letter, if she wants to leave that with Alice Mercier as you walked in, and she'll ensure that it's on our files and as a public record. So anybody that wants to share their information, please do so. Leave it with Alice, and also on the tables. If you don't want to come up here, but you have an opinion, there's sheets on the table. There's you can write down your suggestions, your advice, and then leave it with Alice, and we'll make sure that all that information becomes part of the public record. Thank you.
Good evening. First of all, I'm here as your District School Board Ontario Northeast trustee. At our meeting last night, excuse me, we received a letter asking us to support keeping the habitat open. A motion was put forward that we do this and passed at our board. So you should know that the reason I'm commenting on this, it was passed last night, so it could be that the letter hasn't been forwarded yet and nobody else outside the board, unless you were watching our live streaming last night, won't have anything. Now I would like to speak to you more as a citizen of Cochrane. First of all, I would like to congratulate whoever chose the byline that they were going to close the habitat. we could not have paid for the advertisement that we got for that byline. I would suggest to you that it probably went viral in the province of Ontario and probably went outside those borders also. So that's the positive side of it. Unfortunately, I see a negative side, because now, if the council votes to close it, I would assume that's going to go almost as viral. To me, if we see a vacationer tourist here in the next 10 years, it will be amazing that they've chosen to come to our town, because we have just, if we go and close it, we've just slammed the door for our future. We have the biggest attraction of tourism in the whole of Northeast. I don't know whether other towns and cities are calling Cochrane up and saying that they will support them too, but they're going to pay a heavy price also, because if they're not coming to Cochrane to see the polar bear habitat, they're not going to be in Timmins and the other areas either, many people. Following that, if the motels aren't busy or are losing customers, they're going to have some financial problems. I believe that we have the possibility of an addition onto one motel and a Comfort Inn being built in our town. I would assume that they're following us just as closely as we all are. So, if they decide there won't be enough people coming to Cochrane to fill their beds, I would think that maybe they will decide not to build here. So what kind of a cost is that to the town of Cochrane if the Comfort Inn don't build here and we lose all of that taxes for the next, until the motel falls down, I guess, it's not going to be in our coffers. I'd like to think that we're thinking a bit further ahead than that, and not just throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Finally, just some comment on my own taxes. My house is valued at around $300,000, so I pay $3,600 about in taxes. At last night's board meeting, I asked the lady from Kirkland Lake, "What is your house valued at in Kirkland Lake?" And she said, $150,000. I said, "What do you pay in taxes?" She said, "Oh, almost $4,000. So that's half the value of my house, and she's paying more in taxes. And I thought I heard from somebody that we are paying the highest taxes of anybody in Northern Ontario, or that kind of idea. My person I talked to from Timmins, her house was valued at in the neighborhood of $500,000, and she pays around $8,000 in taxes. Still, a lot more, if you take it out in mathematics, a lot more than we're paying. So a 1% increase will cost me $36. I think I can manage that in the other things I owe and still make it come out so that I can buy my groceries and whatever else. But I believe strongly that it would be a huge mistake for the future of our town if we slam the door on that. I think on Sunday, the Polar Bear Habitat committee or group, whatever, board, gave us an option that they would like to consult with us on how the future might go ahead. I haven't heard anybody yet say that they were willing to sit down and talk to them. The figures we're throwing around now are not maybe accurate, because I don't think that process has been gone through. And at the least, I would hope that the town council would sit down with the board of directors and say, what can we work out? Thank you.
Good evening. Bonjour, Wache. Welcome everybody to discuss polar bear habitat and its position today for Cochrane and the surrounding region. For those who are here today or this afternoon, this is going to be somewhat of a repeat. You might have heard it already, but I think, it's nice to hear the story twice. My name is Rodney Hunout. I am one of the elected councillors for Cochrane, one of your 6. Also the executive director for the family health team in Cochrane and the chair of the economic development board here in Cochrane. I'd like to thank JP Burdett, the board members, Charlie Angus, and the rest of the speakers for the plan that was outlined for the polar bear habitat November 17, 2019 in Cochrane. As a councillor, I am in a neutral position, there's no doubt, but I think there's some facts and some information that's very important to you as taxpayers and people of the community that will help you make your decision. Let's speak about the $400,000 lost to a business. Any $400,000 business that's going in a deficit, there's no doubt that means bankruptcy year after year. The information delivered to the community has been slightly non-consistent. And the question is, how can taxpayers make a decision if the facts are not all available? I will get back to the $400,000 shortly. True question. What is the economical impact to the Cochrane community? Has it been evaluated to take all the economic spin-offs? So, as we look around the house, you know, everybody might have had a mortgage at some point in time. Some of you may have one now, you may have one a long time ago. So let's imagine some gentleman, maybe a female, maybe a family. They have a house worth $250,000. You know, times are tough. You know, they run into some life changes, thus difficulty making payments. They just don't run away from the house. They meet with a financial institution and they say, what can we do? We create a plan. We find solutions. We just don't run away from the house and bulldoze it down. Is the solution to walk away? I don't think so. Or does the bank work with the client to find solutions? Or do you sell the house and pay the amount owing, thus reducing your liabilities to the bank? So many solutions and so many opportunities as an example. My platform when elected as a potential councillor for the town of Cochrane, I spoke about the attraction retention strategy. I alluded to the beautiful pavement with straight, bright yellow lines that represent our streets and the excellence of our infrastructure system. When I talk pavement, I'm talking the beautiful streets that we should have. This does not attract tourism. You can sell your beautiful streets all day long in Toronto. People will not come. When you look at Canadian Tire, Home Hardware, retail stores within the community, when you get to your Wednesday or so, you look in your mail, and guess what? Canadian Tire and the Home Hardware flyer are there, and you know most men are flipping through it. These organizations use this for marketing and getting people into their store. Flashy pictures, sales, deals, percentages off, just to name a few. That attracts people to your local store, but it takes a positive marketing approach to get the client to spend money. Our community is not perfect, yet neither is marketing strategy. Our community is not perfect as well as our marketing strategy. As taxpayers, did you know that if you bought a membership at the Polar Bear Habitat, that you were also entitled to free dumping fees to dump your sewage for your RV throughout the summer months? The question is, how many people knew? Did we market it? Most places charge between $15 and $25 per dumping. So as we talk about taxes, one of our taxpayers just left the mic and says, hey, these are our tax amounts. So we talk about 5% of your taxes presently is going to the polar bear habitat. And you're going to hear different numbers from different speakers tonight, but I'm just going to kind of run off the $2,500, $4,000, $6,000. If your taxes are approximately $2,500 a year, on a daily rate, that's 34 cents a day. If you're $6,000 a year, it's 82 cents a day. As an example, for those that know my dad, he will spend over that in a day in local establishments on coffee, snacks, and lunch. What's 84 cents a day? The council has implemented the MAT tax for hotels this past summer at 4%. 2% goes toward tourist committee, and 2% goes toward the town for tourist application. Comment I made was if we implement a MAT tax, which is your municipal accommodation tax, to the hotels, we have a direct responsibility to ensure the community drives tourism and an economic dollars to help offset municipal taxes to Cochrane. How do we support our MAT tax and start to take away when we take away one of our key attractions? Recruiting doctors. Cochrane has one of the best recruiting attraction strategies possible in Ontario. I've been to Thunder Bay, I've been to Ottawa, I've been to Halifax, the Society of Rural Physicians of Canada. When they hear about what we have for our doctors if they come here, housing strategies, income office costs, and all the perks to go with the role, Cochrane's the most beautiful place. Question is, why do we only have 3 left? Why does CAP have 10? Why does Hearst have 10? Why does Kirkland Lake have 9? The question remains to be answered. So, based on the recruitment fairs, we have to find a wow factor. Your patients are patients. Your hospitals are hospitals. Your offices are offices. But what does Cochrane have that will attract those people here and bring them to the town of Cochrane to remain and bring their family and spend locally? So for your information, cost to taxpayers. Our arena is at $900,000 your taxes. Library, $300,000. Daycare, $300,000. Are we prepared to shut those locations down too? What is the impact to our taxes at that point? Will we become an Eric Falls or Spoon Rock? One of my physicians spoke to me today, and I asked him about the polar bear habitat. He's from Toronto. I said, what was your experience? He says, you know what, my little son, he talks about it all the time. Just imagine, he shows up the polar bear habitat, there's snow on the ground, Santa is there. What the perfect picture. A niche that only Cochrane has. Try and find that anywhere else. Economic cycle. Seems to be pretty simple. We need tourists. We need tourism dollars to come to our community and be spent locally. They get spent in the restaurants, they get spent in the gas stations, they get spent in the retail stores, they get spent at the hotels. Those tax dollars by those businesses who pay the most in taxes compared to our households are also helping inject money into our community. That money then turns around and gets spent in our infrastructure systems. Once it's spent in the infrastructure systems, then we're making our town more beautiful, and the cycle continues to evolve. But if you don't have those attractions in place, you will not have any tourism, and we will be forced to pay the increase in dollars. So the question is, those municipal tax dollars are used toward infrastructure, improvement, maintenance. If we have no tourism left and the businesses go away, how do we as taxpayers plan to pay for those increasing costs? Those businesses were paying the higher taxes for us. But if they're gone and we have still roads and streets and water and sewer and infrastructure to keep up, where's the dollars come from? Taxpayers. When I was in college many years ago, my teacher told me 2 important items to remember. 1, you only need to remember 1 of them. I would change jobs approximately 7 times a year in my career. I'm actually on number 6, but that doesn't matter. Tourism and recreation are a cost to operate and will not bring a surplus revenue. Think about it. Tourism and recreation are a cost to operate and will not bring a surplus revenue. Imagine if you were charged $50 every time you want to come swim in the pool. Would you? It's like a Walmart. For years, Walmart has sold milk at a cost just below cost as a loss leader to get you into their store. Although you'll always buy something to go with your milk. And that's what tourism is. Tourism and recreation needs to be designed to reduce the amount of loss to the bottom line. That's the new focus point. The bigger question are Cochrane taxpayers prepared to have an increase in taxes to support this infrastructure? We have our COLA, cost of living allowance. Does not go up for everybody, but the town's cost of operation do yearly. Your fuel, your parts, your equipment, unionized wages and benefits, and your equipment and supplies. Those that remember Timmins Stars and Thunder Festival 2 years ago was a 7-day music event. Many people from the community did not attend due to personal choices, cost of tickets, dislike of type of music, and now the taxpayers are paying $2.3 million back through their taxes. As taxpayers, we need to be fiscally responsible regarding the decisions we make, because if businesses leave Cochrane, we are still accountable to the cost of municipal operations. Business will only come to a thriving community, not only one that is slowing growth. In 2018, there was a resolution for the polar bear habitat to reduce the taxpayers' expense by $50,000 a year. Moving forward, it could be partially or fully sustainable. We should be recognizing that the focus was already put in place prior to the council taking their role. Mayor, council, Town of Cochrane staff have been elected or hired to find solutions to problems. We are supposed to be the problem solvers and not door closers. Let's think outside the box and work with all parties to find solutions to work together and still be that community that's wonderfully unexpected. If after all avenues are explored, then a serious decision has to be made. Please consider the bigger picture, because once a resolution is in place, it may be too late. Thank you. Thank you, Witch.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to share a few thoughts with you here this evening. I'm not here tonight to chastise anybody or criticize decisions that are being made. I'm not here to fly in the face of anything that's being decided, quite frankly, with respect to one council or another. I'm here as a citizen like you to share some thoughts and ideas from someone who I think brings a very unique perspective to the discussion and can offer some thoughts and ideas that are unique to how the decisions are being made. So hopefully I can share that with you here tonight. I understand completely the fiscal responsibility, and I appreciate where the council's coming from. I think their responsibility back to us as constituents is to take our money and be responsible with our money. And I think that's what they're trying to do. I happen to be of the school of thought that believes that everybody who runs for council runs on good intentions, and I don't think very few, if any, run on council to be disruptive or to hurt the community or do those types of things. So I appreciate, and I think I'm probably one of the few in the room here who can actually appreciate and feel for where the council is and the difficult decision that they have to make. So I'm trying to respect that and moving through this. What I'm struggling with, unfortunately, is the approach and how we went from having what I thought was a plan in place to help one of the key assets in our community move itself forward and continue to contribute to the vitality of our community long in the future, to overnight through what seems like one closed session discussion to being permanently shut down and discussing, do we open it? I mean, it's almost at the point where it's shut down, and now we have to talk about convincing people to open it. And that's just, I'm lost as to how we got to that point. So I have a lot of questions, and I'm not sure tonight's forum is the best place for us to ask those questions. So I'll be asking to be placed on the next Tuesday council agenda as a delegation to have a constructive and courteous conversation with council on what I think about some of the information that we have, which I think there's a ton of misinformation being floated, unfortunately, and do my part the best I can, as I'm going to here this evening, to be a constructive part of helping council make an informed and proper choice on our behalf. And I hope I'm welcomed by council to do that. Quite frankly, where I begin to have some struggle is on the report that was produced for council to make a decision. Now, like you, I'm on the outside looking in, and I'm sure there's a lot of decisions, and I know that better than anybody, that are being made that I'm not aware of and others aren't being made aware of. So these forums and maybe a discussion at council and discussions one-on-one together as citizens of the community who care together will shed some light on that. So I can only work with what I have as you, and I can tell you that I am overwhelmed by the support that has come out here over the past couple of days for the Polar Bear Habitat. I spent 8 years, obviously, as mayor of the community, and you know, have a sense or a gut feeling of, you know, where the support in the community is. We never really went through an exercise like this, but to see the support and to see the overwhelming support for the facility, I think is heartwarming, you know, and I think it's a signal and a sign to, you know, why we are successful as a community, why we are, if you'll pardon the pun, wonderfully unexpected. You know, for small towns, they typically don't move the type of issues that have been moved in this community. And there are a lot of people who came way before my term in council, and there are a lot of people during my term in council. There are a lot of people now on council who are just pulling off great things for our community. And to see the support around the room and to see it over the next few nights, or the past few nights, like I said, is overwhelming. And you know what? It's a testament to us as a community, and something we all should be extremely proud of, and you all should be extremely proud of. So hopefully we can lean on that now as we go forward. My sense, not knowing all the answers to this point, is if the issue is impact on the tax levy, then there's already a plan in place that's dealing with the impact on the tax levy. This plan was put in place late 2017 when the then council had the same sense with the current council on the burden around the polar bear habitat. Of course, everybody realized that this is a key asset and we better be very responsible in how we go forward about making this decision. And in that responsibility, we need to recognize that certain stones have to be turned over before you come to that conclusion, the conclusion we're at here today. And we met with the board, and the board had reorganized itself. And I don't know if you know who's on the Polar Bear Habitat board, but this is an extremely skilled board. It's not a typical board that you're used to. You have expatriates from this community who are very successful people who live outside the community for the most part, who are committed and dedicated to the mandate of this facility and what it means to their community, and they care that much. There are very smart people on that board who are working their tails off trying to work an issue through this. Now, my last conversation with the chair was just a simple, I don't have all the information you have. Seeing what you've seen so far with the reporting and the information, is there hope? And it was an overwhelming yes, there's more than hope, we think we can do it. So we have to give them an opportunity to be able to work their way through that issue to help us continue to realize the benefits that come from a facility like this, from an attraction like this. But that plan was reinforced in January 2018. And the plan was that they believed strongly that the tourism aspect of the facility, of the attraction, was not going to continue to pay the bills. I mean, we have, 15 years experience on the tourism side of it, and the revenues were always projected and they weren't met. So somehow we have to, I'm sorry, is there a bottle of water here somewhere? It's pretty dry in here, is there? No? Somehow we have to look at a different way to make the facility feasible. So the feasibility was to go after research, because what the board believes is, with the skilled people that are sitting on the board, that places like Churchill, Manitoba, who have a similar facility to what we have, but they're totally research-based, are relying on the dollars associated to science and research around polar bears and climate change and the importance of that to society and being an important element going forward in society. So the feasibility is to test that, is a test, can that same thing be done here? That feasibility had a first draft created last month. It's not even finished. That's the HR&A agreement that everybody's referring to. Thanks, Todd. That's the HR&A agreement that everybody's referring to. It's only in a draft stage. Now, I've been a management consultant for 25 years. I've done many consulting assignments, many business plans, many strategic plans. And I can tell you as a consultant who does that work, your first draft is based on all of the information you've gathered from discussions and looking in, from being the outside looking in. As a consultant, you don't typically live in the community or in the organization, so you're learning everything from the outside looking in. You don't hone those recommendations until you have a chance to vet that with your clients. So when you bring the first draft of recommendations, those recommendations are very high level, and what you do is you start testing some of the things with your client. And you allow the client to come back and forth and say, yeah, that's gonna work, but I think you've misunderstood this because this, that, and so on and so forth. They haven't got to that stage yet in the HR agreement. They're on the very first draft of recommendations, and the board hadn't even seen them. And this recommendation from, this report was created from council or from the town that leaned on that report saying, well, these are disastrous. These recommendations aren't gonna work. And some of the frustration on the board's standpoint, from the board's standpoint with respect to, they haven't even had a chance to vet this yet, so let's work our way through the vetting process before we start jumping to conclusions. And then when you look at that, the next stage after the feasibility, which is due at the end of this month, I believe, is a business plan. And that business plan is going to take the recommendations that are vetted by the council, by the board, by the town staff, and all the skilled people that are there, and build a process forward that is going to identify how the polar bear habitat is going to pay for all this stuff, if they want to pay for all this stuff, how this is going to work, and how the contribution from the town is going to be relieved. If the issue here is the pressure on the tax levy, that's already being dealt with. And I don't see how we're anywhere near a position where we can start determining, well, this is disastrous, we can't pay for it, and we have to shut it down. So when I look at that, and I work my way through the process a little more, there are conclusions that are being made that I'm struggling with as well too, because like I said, they're early on to begin with, but because they just don't make sense, and because a lot of things in the report aren't even accurate. I can attest to that, I know they're not. So how do you move forward with that? Well, first thing is, if the option you're putting back to the community is either find the money or shut it down, can I politely suggest there are many more options than that? That's not the only option that should be on the table. At this point, if we recognize the value of that community, and I'll talk about that here shortly. Some other options include, offsetting part of the deficit and run with it. What I'm hearing from the community at large is they're not struggling overall with the money that's going to the polar bear habitat. They understand the fiscal responsibility, but I don't get the sense that it's you have to pay everything off or else we don't want it. So there's another option. The polar bear habitat as a separate entity and rent the facility. That's the next step in this plan I was talking to you about is the habitat. These are scientists. These are people who are studying science around polar bears and their impacts on the environment. And you know what, there's also other neat things taking place here as well too. For example, this is the largest natural habitat for captive polar bears on the entire planet, right here in Cochrane. And they're doing some very interesting research around rehabilitation of polar bears. What most people don't recognize is that the polar bears that are here are captive polar bears. They're coming from zoos, they're in cement boxes or what have you. In fact, there's an interesting story about one of the bears. I think it was Bizitech. Maybe I'm wrong on the name, but when in the early stages of this process in this facility started up, they brought the bear up, and it took 6 hours to get the bear out of the truck because it struggled putting its paw on grass. It didn't know what grass was. So there's a very interesting aspect to what this facility is and how it started in its infancy. Now it's grown into the largest natural habitat for captive polar bears in the world. But these captive polar bears cannot be released into the wild. They'll never be released into the wild. What the polar bear habitat does for them is provides them the next best thing to living their lives the way they should be living their lives and getting them out of those cement boxes and so on. So it's a beautiful story all around how you look at it. But the bottom line is that there's an opportunity here. They want to move off in their own direction, and so they should, because the politics of the town has no place in any business, let alone a science-based business. And I know the council would be happy for the polar bear habitat, I'm sure, to be sustainable on its own and drive its own entity. What we really should be doing ultimately and striving towards is leasing our assets, which is the $7 million that was invested into the facility and the amount of money we've operated it with, and leasing that back to somebody, right, who knows what they're doing. And then what we get is just like the seniors complex. We've invested no money in the seniors complex. We've invested no loans, no borrowing, no operating costs, nothing. Somebody else is running it, but the town's getting the benefit. It's a beautiful situation. And if we could ever get to that point with the habitat, that's where we should go. So there's another option. Pay the deficit. Just pay it all out. The reality is that $400,000 sounds like a lot of money, and it is to you and me and the average folk. But on a basis of a $14 million budget, what it boils down to is 25 cents a day, and that is the real figure, folks. I can attest to that. The cost of that facility, as it stands right now, to each and every one of us who are paying property taxes residentially in this community, is 25 cents a day. So is that an option that we're okay with that? It might be. But the plan is to take that and reduce it even more. And then there's a long-term view on the vitality. So one of the things that we miss as small communities is recognizing that in capitalism, you buy 2 cows, you multiply them into 40 cows, you sell them and you retire. But you have to buy those 2 cows. If you don't buy those 2 cows, you don't get anything. So you have to spend money to make money. The vitality of our community, I think, should be our focal point. It's not an economic impact assessment one way or the other around the polar bear habitat. You're not going to get the impact or the economics to line up. The bottom line is there's not enough mass here to get them to line up. So if you look at Science North in Sudbury, do you know that 60% of the revenues for Science North comes from Sudbury citizens themselves paying to go in? We don't have that. So if we're going to take a straight line fiscal approach to everything, this facility is 3 times in debt has 3 times the deficit of the habitat. You heard from Rodney with the library and the daycare and so on. Can you imagine our community without the polar bear habitat, the event center, the library, and the daycare? I mean, there's no vitality left in the community. So that vitality is important. And what this facility does is it drives profile around Cochrane, and it continues to put value on that vitality. So that's where the value is for us. So when I grabbed the CAO's report, and with the greatest respect to, is Darren here? With the greatest respect to the CAO, I haven't met the man yet, and I'm struggling critiquing his work or other people's work without doing that, but unfortunately, time is of the essence, and we have to get through this. This is not a financial analysis, the way it's tabled. It's an opinion report. A financial analysis is a cost-benefit analysis. So you get the cost side and you get the benefit side. The benefit side isn't in here. And I know that we had a regional constellation community impact economic development model that was producing numbers for this community specifically that identified around $6 million a year between 2004 and 2010 were brought to this community through that facility. Now, you can argue economic impact models, that was specific to this community. Certainly it's within plus or minus 10%. Cut that in half if you just want to end the argument. You know, there is some economics coming back, but we're never going to put our finger on it. The bottom line is that it's not about economics. It's about vitality. So I struggle with a lot of the conclusions in the report, and I think the best place to deal with this is at the council table, like I said, where we can have a fruitful and constructive discussion together. And I think that's where I'll leave the details of it. And I won't challenge the numbers that went up here on the wall as well too, because I think there's a lot of room there for discussion and debate as well. But what I will do is focus on one important thing. In the report, let me read to you a bit of the section that's justifying the closure of the habitat. The town's current branding is centered around a cartoon image of a polar bear with the tagline of "Wonderfully Unexpected." All of this work has been done with the good intention of strengthening our brand, in quotes. However, polar bears are not a part of our local culture or history, making this marketing and branding effort seem to be more like a gimmick than a real reflection of our roots of who we are as a community. Well, Chimo has been around for 60 years in this community, and I defy anybody in this room, I defy anybody in the region to identify a brand more successfully lined up with a municipality than the polar bear in Cochrane. You're not going to find one. And that kind of branding is priceless. Multi-millions of dollars are spent by organizations every year trying to get that branding. And we're literally talking about removing Chimo as our brand to justify closing down the polar bear habitat. You can see where I struggle. Here's the last part of that. There's even the prospect that the town's image of a cold, barren landscape only suitable to polar bears may even hurt our image and be a disincentive for people looking to relocate to Cochrane for employment or other reasons. This is an area that certainly requires additional research and conversation with the public and what our image and brand should be. So clearly, the rationalization in the report that was presented to council is we need to rebrand ourselves because that's one of the reasons why we don't need the habitat. I certainly hope that's misplaced. I certainly hope we have a fruitful discussion on what the merits of that are, but I think that is the most underlying important issue of this whole discussion, and we need to stay focused on. So look, the reality is, and I'm going to wrap up here really quick, but the reality is that the report speaks to hotels, and the hotels aren't on board and so on. We heard from arguably the largest and most recognized hotel in Cochrane, and the chair of the newly formed Tourism Association, that's just not accurate. That they believe that the polar habitat does contribute hugely to their business and that it's important for them. This HRNA agreement is a draft. So how are we drawing these conclusions on a draft document that isn't even complete yet? The data analysis leaves room, and a lot of room for us to discuss, and hopefully we'll do that at the council table. And then this really needs to be vetted by the polar bear habitat. Just to give you a perfect example, last Sunday, the polar bear habitat already reduced $50,000 to $70,000 of cost once they had an opportunity to start vetting some of this discussion. Have to have that discussion before we get to this point here and start concluding we have to shut down the habitat. The MAT tax that Rodney spoke to wasn't even part of their report, which will add about another $60,000 or so to the equation. So there's all kinds of room to address the issue around the impact on the town and its tax levy. So look, we need to understand the true value of the PBH I spoke to earlier. The true value of the PBH is not economic, as I said, all right? Over the past few years, we've been recognized as top 50 small towns in all of Canada. Yeah, and in that equation, there were 7 towns that were recognized in Ontario, only 1 in Northern Ontario, Cochrane. And in their dissertation, at the center of it is the polar bear habitat and the attraction that the polar bear habitat is. We've been recognized as top 25 tourist destinations by another organization. And those organizations are selling packages to people to go places and so on. The habitat is the largest natural habitat for polar bears in the entire world. The profile that brings our community, so they had 8,000 visits this year to the habitat, which incidentally was up 25%, and the lines are trending upward. But what nobody spoke to, and it wasn't mentioned in the report, are the 6,000 visits that came from the webcam system that exists inside the habitat, which almost doubles the visitations. Now, every person around the world can go on a camera or on a computer, look at the habitat and see any part of the habitat and the polar bears at any time, and they do that frequently, 6,000 of them this summer. Every one of those people has to go through the word Cochrane, the term Cochrane, and recognize this is in Cochrane, Ontario. That type of marketing is absolutely priceless in terms of the exposure this community gets. So look, quite frankly, the economic impact assessment is there. I'm happy to share that with council. They can put whatever solace they want into it and so on. But the next steps, in my view, are pretty simple. Complete the process that's already started before we jump to this conclusion. Turn those stones over so that if you have to come to this conclusion, and I know it's a possibility because we faced it ourselves, but if you have to come to this conclusion, you bring it to the community in a responsible and credible way so people can have faith in it. But right now, we're way ahead and way premature in terms of making that deduction. Reduce this year's contribution by 50 to 70,000. It's already done for you by the polar bear habitat. Check mark. Promote the intention to make it work, in terms of the habitat is not closing. So one of the people are joking around about the exposure we're getting because of everything going viral right now. But my fear is this is a donation-dependent facility. And if we want them to find new revenues, it's going to have to be in foundations and donations. That's the direction you have to go in. And if people think this place is closed or closing, we're not going to get a single cent. And we're killing ourselves before we even get moving. We have to get this out of the media. That messaging has to be out of the media. This difficult decision, make it as you see fit, but do it in-house, do it responsibly with the polar bear habitat, do it responsibly with all the smart people in the town and the staff that are there, and keep it to yourself. And if somewhere down the road we have to make that decision, then make it then. But right now, give this facility the opportunity it needs to succeed, because we're not doing that by getting in the media and doing what we're doing right now. Turn every stone over, as I said, and give that skills-based board an opportunity to do their work, and I think you're going to be surprised, because there are viable options for the habitat. Let's get behind the polar bear habitat. Let's give our council a clear message and support them in a difficult decision they have to make. And let's ensure that everybody are making responsible choices here with responsible information before we draw the conclusion that we need to remove one of the most successful assets and developments in all of Northern Ontario that exists right here in Cochrane. I believe in the habitat, I believe in us, and I believe in you guys as a council to make the right choice. Thanks.
Let's not get into a debate, Jerry, please. Let's not get into a debate. Well, I don't, you're open? Okay, but we don't want it to become a debate, please. One question.
Okay, two good questions. First one is, I believe I answered, we already have a plan in place. Until January 2018, we came to the conclusion that we needed to get the feasibility done, a business plan, and we've directed the habitat to come up with a plan to remove as much of, if not all of, the burden on a community. So that part you should be happy about. That was in place. I don't know why the new council was not presented that or don't understand it, or maybe they do, and I'm not going to presume that here in a microphone, a bunch of people are going to. But the responsibility was that there was no manager, Jerry, because we had put that role into the CAO's office because we thought the CAO's office was the most important office in the community and gave it the high profile that it needed, and it was being run through the CAO's office. Somewhere in a transition somewhere, if I were to guess, it's been lost, but it shouldn't be. I'm here just to remind people that it's there, we should be focusing on it, and we should be driving that direction because I think it does what everybody does. In terms of a referendum, most of you know me well enough for being here for 8 years that I'm more than happy to take accountability before the public and deal with things publicly. I'm one of the few politically oriented people that's comfortable doing that and actually likes doing that. But I can tell you, I don't think a referendum is the best approach, because what a referendum does is it gets people to make a decision on things sometimes they may not properly understand. You have smart people sitting on the council. They have a mandate from the people of this community to represent them and make the best decisions on their behalf, and their intentions are good and to do that. And I just think if we provide the right information and the right data and we work together, they're going to make the responsible, informed choice, and we won't need a referendum that splits and divides the community, if that answers your question.
Hello, everyone. I'm not going to be singing a song for you tonight, but no, good thing, eh? It's still early and the bar's closed, so we're good. All right, first off, I'd like to commend Mayor Clement and our councillors for having this information session and a chance for everybody to voice their opinions. I think that's a sign of true democracy. They're to be commended. Thank you very much. Well, I'm a lifelong Cochraneite, if you don't know me. My name is Eric Langlois, born and raised, proud, personally know just about everybody out there and love all of you. So we'll take the emotional part of the equation here because I know it's a really emotional subject, being tied to the polar bear habitat. Like the great memories I had with the kids and stuff, and whenever you have relatives or people from out of town, the first thing they want to do when they come here is visit the habitat, which they can't do anywhere else. So, and I also work in the service industry, which is very competitive. What you try to do is you sell your wares and you try to convince customers that you're the better choice. And the first thing you do is a marketing strategy. And you want your name to come out first, so you get that first phone call, so you get the first crack at it. And, in the past, we were lucky. Our forefathers, for whatever reason, came up with the polar bear, Chimo the polar bear mascot that stood at the town entrance and still stands there now. Second rendition, but still looking good. And I don't know if it was luck or foresight, supernatural foreseeance or whatever, but it's brilliant marketing. So all of our events, Carnival, Polar Bear Express, a lot of business names still bear the Polar Bear name. It's a brand, that's marketing 101. You don't see that anywhere else. So enter the polar bear habitat, which is known around the world. And make no questions about it, it is known around the world. As far as Australia, just recently it made national headlines in Australia on all the media with Henry the polar bear coming here. Kind of good advertising there, I'd say. You don't generate that kind of buzz for a community by publishing in a tourism magazine and pulling an ad or going to conferences. That's just done. That's automatic, and it's very unique. We're very lucky to do that and have that kind of buzz for a town our size in the middle of northeastern Ontario. Face it, we love it here, but people see us as the middle of nowhere. So, every town in the north has good fishing. They have forestry. They have hunting. They have industry like logging, softwood, mining. You look around and we're all very similar, but some certain things stand out. And I just want you guys to, just for a second, to imagine that you're not local, you're not from Northern Ontario, and you could be from Southern Ontario, Western Canada, Maritimes, whatever. And I'll ring out some town names, see what stands out. And this is no dissing these other towns. It's all due respect. I love them all. We're all Northerners, but just proving a point. So Kapuskasing, paper mill. Iroquois Falls, paper mill at one time. Dryden, paper mill. Kirkland Lake, mine. But if I say Bracebridge, hey, Santa's Village. If I say Cochrane, hey, that's the polar bear place. So right off the bat, we're easier to remember just because we have a polar bear as a brand and the polar bear habitat to complement it. So we're lucky to have all our services and amenities in such a small town. I don't know what the net worth of the town is. I know it was published a year or so ago, but I know, from what I remember, it's in the millions of dollars. Our net worth, I'll put my name out there and I'll say that is a lot higher than other communities of the same stature that we have. And we're lucky for that. We have numerous motels, numerous restaurants, numerous gas stations, and those are businesses, and those are businesses that pay taxes and that invest in our community. And you lose those, like it was pointed out earlier, you're in trouble, and that's when your personal taxes go up. So, I think closing the polar bear habitat with the media and everything, it gives the impression that we're closed for business. We are now, like every other town in Northern Ontario, don't bother moving here. May as well stay where you are because, there's no point, nothing different here. And I love that what we've invested in the last few years. We're a world-class rec facility here, year-round peninsula structure that is used year-round, drive by every weekend, something's going on there. And the amazing boardwalk. That's called quality of life, and that's investing in quality of life, and that's very important. That's not supposed to make money. That's supposed to make us richer as people and as individuals, and there's no price tag to that as far as I'm concerned. We are the envy of a lot of towns comparable to what we are. And so you ask yourself, a lot of people, you can live to exist, so you can shut yourself in, don't buy that four-wheeler, don't buy that RV, I don't want any payments, I don't want anything, or you can live for life. I choose the latter. I hope you all do too. Thank you very much.
Hello, everybody. For those that I haven't met yet, my name is Dylan McCart, and I'm the Conservation Coordinator at the Polar Bear Habitat. Thanks. I coordinate all the research and education programs that we have at the Habitat. I am a polar bear researcher. I've been studying polar bears for about 9 years now, and I've been at the Habitat for just about 6 years. I am the Canadian Regional Advisor for the Species Survival Plan of polar bears. That means that I advise on all polar bears in Canada within human care when it comes to research, location, breeding. I also sit on the North American Polar Bear Research Committee as the Canadian representative. That means that I review and analyze all polar bear studies that are done with bears in our care. So I am originally from Northwestern Ontario. I went to school at University of Manitoba, and then I came here as a one-year internship with NOHFC. That was in 2014. I've been here ever since, and I've led the focus in research and education. Now we are globally recognized as a research and education facility. We have an amazing team of specialized people, and all but one has moved with family and friends to this great town just because of the polar bears. I have brought letters of support from other globally recognized institutions like Polar Bears International, Churchill Northern Studies Center, the International Polar Bear Conservation Center, the Center for Conservation of Research and Endangered Wildlife, just to name a few. Here are a few quotes from our research partners. So North American facilities that house polar bears do not compare to the Habitat. The space and naturalistic environment it provides to its residents bears is unparalleled. This is an impressive facility as it is, and can become a top research center with support. The basic knowledge we gain from the bears living at the Habitat quite simply cannot be replicated anywhere else. The Polar Bear Habitat is a globally recognized leader in polar bear research. This is from the Study Center in Churchill, Manitoba. We are certainly familiar with the budgetary challenges of operating a remote facility devoted to research and education, but the rewards are well worth the investment in time, energy, and resources. Our community partners recognize our facility attracts researchers and others from all around the world. Don't take my word for it. Please take a look at the letters of support that these professional institutions have given to us. They're accessible through Town Hall, and I also have copies with me tonight. The biggest misconception we have is that we are a zoo. We are not a zoo. In fact, we are the closest thing in the world to the world's only polar bear sanctuary, since we focus only on one species and provide the largest enclosures in the world. Now I'd like to talk about the science implications. We have more information on polar bears than anyone else has ever recorded in the entire world. That includes behavior. Thanks. That includes behavior, head and body measurements, and natural denning behaviors from a possibly pregnant female. Because we monitor our bears 24/7 and provide them with highly personalized behavioral plans, we are a leader in welfare standards for animals in human care. We are more than just research. We participate directly in wild polar bear conservation with indigenous coastal communities in Hudson Bay and the James Bay area. We help develop technologies for field scientists. We are raising and setting the highest standards for polar bears all over the world. We also have an amazing on-site and outreach educational programs that have been implemented all over the world, from the United States to Europe to Australia. We are excited for the Board of Directors' new plan and possible upgrades to the habitat. These upgrades will help us grow and potentially bring in more revenue. However, let me assure you that if it is not financially feasible, it is not necessary to implement any new additions, any new staff, or unnecessary repairs and maintenance. We want more than anyone for the habitat to succeed and be less reliant on taxpayers' money. The staff at the Polar Bear Habitat is 100% committed to working with the town of Cochrane and the Board of Directors to ensure that the cost to the taxpayer will not be raised in 2020 and in fact will reduce the bottom line by increasing revenues. I fully trust and support our board members who are experienced professional specialists that have done their research and they have hard data to effectively implement their plan. The plan that they've been working on for multiple years. We are hoping that the Board of Directors is given the chance to implement their long-term initiative and receive final plans for their amazing venture that they have taken on as volunteers. They have been working on this plan for the last 2 years, and it is unfortunate that they haven't been able to present to the public since it is not final yet. If you're a supporter of the habitat or have any questions, please reach out to me, your mayor and council, if you have to have those questions answered and share your passion for the habitat. As the SSP advisor, I am worried. I'm worried, and so are other facilities, about where these bears will go if we close. There is the place in Canada, and shipping these bears overseas is costly and stressful. If something doesn't seem right, please ask questions. If there is something I can do to clear anything up, I will be available for the rest of the night. If anyone would like to further clarification on anything I've been speaking about and talk about our amazing facility. Thank you to the town of Cochrane for their support. Thank you to our dedicated volunteers, our support groups like People for the Polar Bear Habitat. Thank you to our supportive and committed Board of Directors, and thank you all for coming tonight. Sure.
I was at the presentation on Sunday night. There was a fellow there, I think from Miracle Falls, I forget his name. He came out with a bunch of statistics and numbers, basically saying that the polar bears are thriving. And of all the statistics he was throwing around, was there anything false in what he was saying?
He was debating if the polar bear population numbers are going up or down. Since polar bears are so wide-ranging, it's hard to find accurate population numbers. What we do know is that the polar bears that we've sampled in the wild, they are in lower body conditions, meaning they're getting skinnier and they're a lot smaller. So because we can't accurately tell the numbers that are out there, we can tell that since their habitat's diminishing, that they are getting a lot skinnier and their body conditions are getting a lot worse. So
So you can't dispute what he was saying.
no. Okay, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sherry Burkholder, for any of you who don't know me. I've been a resident of Cochrane for the better part of 25 years. I moved here to be closer to my now husband. We raised a couple of kids. I moved away to go to school, and I chose to come back to raise my children and have another one in this community. There are a lot of things to be proud of about Cochrane, and I'm telling you, the habitat to me is number one. This past weekend, when there was the information session put out by the polar bear habitat, I couldn't attend because I had already had plans to go down to Ottawa to visit my children and bring down the Nana Papa gifts that aren't going to fit in one trip. While we were down there, we did a little shopping. What does this mean? Not a lot of anything. Stopped, grabbed some popcorn for the grandkids. The gentleman asked me some question, and I was like, yeah, we don't get here as often as we want because the closest Colonel's is 4 hours away. He asked where we were from. I said, Cochrane. He said, isn't that the place with the polar bears? Granted, it's only Ottawa. It's only 9 hours away. 9 hours is a long way for people to know what's going on in your town. These shirts, the one that I'm very proudly wearing tonight, I'm very happy to say we've sold to people in Australia, all over Southern Ontario, out to BC. These aren't people that live here. These aren't people that are from here. These are people that know what Cochrane is and who Cochrane is because of the polar bears. One of the people that has written a letter to council is a friend of my son, who happens to be a polar bear fangirl. She was excited from the time she started hanging around with my son. When can I come up and see your parents? Can I go and visit? I want to see the habitat, blah, blah, blah. We were lucky enough that the day we took her to visit the habitat, it was a slow day. It was a beautiful day. It was warm. It was snowing. It was picturesque. And the place that time of the morning was not well visited. But one of the polar bear keepers happened to be there showing, I believe it was her brother, around the establishment. So we met up with them at the pen, and it was a Inukshuk, I believe, that was outside, and one of the other keepers was working with him. So while we're there visiting, this polar bear fangirl that's with me got to see the keepers interacting with the bears. So she asked a question. She was kind of asking me, just, something random that I may or may not know. Well, the other woman who wasn't even working stepped up and went, oh, I know the answer to that one, and started engaging her in this conversation. Between the two women that worked there, they spent an hour talking to her, giving her the ins and outs of the facility, how they managed to train the bears to respond the way they do, what the impact is on the environment, what she can do, how she can help, how she can spread the message. So the first thing she did when she found out that they were talking about closing the habitat was reach out to me and say, hey, what can I do? So I gave her the link. I said, please write a letter. Tell them what the impact is to you, who you are, what it means to you. So she did that, and then she took to social media and tagged everyone she could think of who is not afraid to stand up and speak their opinion, and ask them to reach out. Does this matter to you? Even a little bit. As a person in Northern Ontario, as a person of the planet Earth, does environmental study and impact mean anything to you? And can you please share your opinion if it does? All I'm asking is that the polar bear habitat be given the chance to read the results of the feasibility study, to present that to the community and to council, and to potentially move forward. Can this be done? I believe it can. Can we give them a year? I personally am willing to pay the taxes for a year. Ideally, I'd like to go beyond that because there's no way they can fix everything in 1 year. But if we can see some signs of positive movement in lowering the debt to us as taxpayers, is it not worth allowing them to continue? I think it is. I would like to see it. And I know for sure, okay, and no offense to council, but I don't think any council ever has decreased taxes. I could be wrong. But if they close the habitat, what does that mean to us? We're still paying the same taxes, but where's the money going? We've had conversations with people who are employed by the town at different points. We being just people in general, whether it be my family, people at work, what have you. And we've said, okay, well, you have the money for this, but you don't have the money for this. Well, yeah, but that's infrastructure. Infrastructure is its own budget, so you can't take this and put it into infrastructure. Okay, that's fine. So rec is this and infrastructure is that. Where does the habitat fit in? And part of this is me being remiss in fact-finding. I should know this. I shouldn't have to put it out there. But if monies that are delegated for one place can only go to that one place, how can you take it away from one to give it to the other? Therefore, if the habitat's being closed, we should get that money back? I don't know. This is for greater minds than me to figure out. I have never had political aspirations. Kudos to you guys that can do it, because it cannot be an easy job. And I realize that you're not like making billions of dollars doing this job. So I really, really do appreciate the fact that you are giving us the opportunity to speak our minds, to voice our opinions, to try and reach out to you and let you know that we're trusting you to make the decisions that are hard, that you've been elected to make, that we have elected you to make. So thank you for listening to us, and please honor your commitment to actually listen, to consider everything that everyone has to say. And I realize not everybody's on my side, and I'm fine with that. Sorry, Peter, you're right, it was very dry in here. I welcome, and we've had discussions with people that say, no, this is not worth it to me. And that's fine. It's not worth it to you, but it is worth it to me. And I'm just asking that everyone who does believe it's worth it, step up, keep the pressure on, be clear, be concise, be respectful. That's all I have to say tonight.
Just to clarify, monies are not all just go to one pot to the other pot. You know, it's all one big pot. The only money that we really can't touch is specific reserves. So no, we can move things around. Okay, and I don't know if we'll ever reduce taxes, but what I do know, in my time, back in '93 to '99, when I was on council, head of finances, it was 0 increase for 6 years. Doesn't mean anything, but.
Okay, good evening, everybody. I'm here to speak on behalf of the Habitat or the Snowmobile Museum. We have been left in the dark the same as you have. Unfortunately, there is a Snowmobile Museum that's attached to the Polar Bear Habitat. It's the second attraction. And I want to fill in some information that maybe a lot of people in this community don't know. First of all, there is a Chimo snowmobile out there that's been produced many, many years ago in Quebec. I have been trying to locate one, and I finally got a hold of one on the weekend as we were at the Sledorama show in Peterborough. And again, a snowmobile show with all kinds of machines. I finally located a gentleman the other side of Quebec City. He is willing to lend us an actual machine that's called the Chimo. It was produced as a Chimo. And since I found out there was a Chimo, like I said, I've been looking for 2 years. There's a gentleman in Musquinonge, Michigan, that was willing to bring one to the border. But then again, it's always at our expense. So to talk about the Snowmobile Museum a little bit, the thing is that yeah, I know, it attracts people to Cochrane, okay? We were at the snowmobile show on the weekend, and the first thing people ask us, where's your museum? Well, it's at the polar bear habitat. Every time we meet people, we don't just talk about our snowmobile museum. We always talk about the facility that our museum is at and the wonderful polar bears that are there and everything else. The first guest speaker tonight spoke something about Levi LaValle that came here last year through Snowmobiler TV and OSM Magazine. I don't know if some of you have seen Levi LaValle's kind of little clips and commercials about the polar bears and talking about the polar bears. I've seen them. They're on YouTube. If you go see Levi LaValle, that guy was so impressed with the polar bears. That's all he talked about. I came to Cochrane to see polar bears. The guy's an American stuntman that everybody in the snowmobile industry looks up to, to Levi LaValle. I've got a magazine I brought here tonight. It's On Snow magazine, and I put little tags in there because On Snow magazine has given us, the Snowmobile Museum, a free half-page ad. Okay, and what does it say? Polar bear habitat. And the thing is that, like On Snow magazine, they just had a show recently in Toronto. A lot of people know the annual Toronto Snowmobile and ATV show, which brings in, thousands and thousands of people. They got a free magazine with their entry fee. That's free advertising for Cochrane. Okay? We have done lots with our snowmobile club. We're only about 15 guys. There's maybe 7 guys that are active people, okay? The problem is, a lot of people say, like the snowmobilers that come to Cochrane, there's a lot of them that have said to us, oh, well, we didn't know it was there, that the Snowmobile Museum was there. Well, when they come, they see the polar bears too, right? The problem is, we don't have the money as a small club because we're a nonprofit and we're taking the money out of our own pocket. So the only advertising we've been able to do is what we pay out of our own pocket. We'd love to have billboards, but there's a marketing tool right there. Half of the motels in towns have nothing that says, that there's a snowmobile museum at the polar bear habitat. Okay? So there's another avenue to bring more people. If they're going to come in with their snowmobiles, for sure they're going to go see the polar bears too. So, we're not even tapping into that because these guys are in the motels at night. And they have nothing to do at night. Why can't we open the habitat one night a week for those snowmobilers? So, there are other ways of generating money and this and that. We're, as a club, we're trying our hardest. Last year was the first year we brought the oval races back to Lake Commando just in January. This year they're coming in March because it was too cold for some of them. But OSOR, the sanctioning body, they told us, and we met them again this weekend, we were at our show there, and they just are amazed at what Cochrane has. They're amazed with the polar bear habitat, they're amazed with the pavilion, and they came to us and said, we will go back if you want us to come back. Okay? So we're the first town in the north to bring back snowmobile oval races. To some people that might not mean a lot, but in Cochrane, the last time there was 1972. Timmins has been trying for years to do that, and they're not successful. Well, when these people come here, and this year they're going to come in more of them because they've heard such good things about the race last year, that they want to come in more and more of them. There's, I can't remember how many, but I've got a list already of people that have already booked their motels for March 14th and 15th to come to Cochrane, which is the first weekend of March break. And they wanted that so that they could spend a couple more days in Cochrane. Where are they going to go? Where's that money going to go? Polar bear habitat. Because they're going to want to go there. It's a place of interest, right? So, this is it. We need help with marketing too, because if a little bit was spent this way, towards the snowmobile industry, you'd have more people coming into your habitat also. So it's just a, so if the habitat closes, what happens to our snowmobile museum? That's the question that a lot of people have asked us. We've heard this is going on. What's going to happen to our snowmobile museum? This is the only snowmobile museum in Ontario, only the second one in Canada to be open to the public. Sudbury were trying to get a museum going. We beat them to the punch. Why did we build a museum in Cochrane? Why did we want a snowmobile museum in Cochrane? Snowmobile started here in Cochrane. Mr. Belot can attest to that. His family were the first ones to have a recreational snowmobile, the Skidoo dealership in all the province of Ontario. So it started here. What's that got to do with polar bears? Well, it brings people to the habitat. Okay, thank you.
Hi, I just want to step in very quickly because I know we're close to our scheduled end time, and I want to make sure to thank you all for showing up here and showing your support and voicing your opinions. Really appreciate it. On behalf of the council, the board, the wonderful volunteer committee, and especially our staff, we would like to invite you to the open house, open doors that we are having at the Habitat tomorrow, Friday, and Saturday. To see what we're talking about. Everything that you've heard tonight, see the bears, see the staff, see what we do, see the snowmobiles, visit the Heritage Village. Please come out, show your support, ask questions. We are there to answer your questions as well and help inform everybody here. So thank you.
Bonsoir, good day. I wasn't going to come speak again tonight, but some people asked me earlier if I could maybe just re-echo the message I passed on this morning. And again, when I walked in tonight, somebody asked me if I'd re-echo. So I'm Luc Deneau. I'm a third generation resident. My grandfather was an early settler in the township of Glackmere. And what I spoke about today was a series of things is what does the polar bear habitat mean to Cochrane? And as I was listening tonight, you don't realize how far we reach with the polar bear habitat, and you're hearing it more and more, but we take it for granted. And it made me think earlier, this past May, we were very lucky. My wife got into the draw for the Masters, so we were able to see Tiger Woods play at the Masters. But you only get to buy a shirt at the Masters that has this special little logo, which I really don't know what it is. But we were traveling on business about 3-4 weeks ago, and we got stopped by this gentleman, and he said to my wife, "I'm jealous. You've got this logo." And so we got talking, and we said, "Where are you from?" He says, "I'm from Los Angeles." And my wife says, "Well, we're from Cochrane." He says, "Cochrane, is that where the polar bears are?" And he says, "My daughter keeps talking about the polar bears." So again, it's amazing how well known Cochrane is about that. But going back to what maybe I said today, and I'm speaking off note, so if I forget anything, I do apologize. Tourism or research of this quality and known and its own branding is a pie grower. In economic development, you talk about a pie. And what does that have to do? Well, there's slices. Tourism grows your pie. Whereas if you have 5 restaurants in Cochrane, you add another one, that one's going to start competing and chew at the other piece of pie. So tourism brings revenues, which we all heard, your gas station, your hotels, don't need to repeat, but you understand the economics of it. The other thing is, in Northern Ontario, we generally don't benefit from the economic activity that's happening in Southern Ontario. Not saying that they're good or better or bad, but I was just at a recent CAO, and for those who may not know, I'm a CAO and Director of Economic Development in an adjoining community. A community in Smoot Rock Falls who has suffered, as you know, and know how expensive it is to rebuild. It is much lesser expensive to retain than it is to rebuild. Ask any business. They benefit from 36% growth in urban cities in Southern Ontario. The rural areas benefit of 7% growth every year. Whereas in Northern Ontario, we don't have that luxury. So whatever we have, we really have to work harder, but you just can't let go. The other thing that I talked about was, what is really the true cost? Like, I mean, as CAOs, and I'm sure, you know, the new CAO will attest to that, we're challenged with the balancing of all the various needs. And before I go on, I want to thank the mayor and the group for readjusting the forum tonight. Because when I came earlier, I was expecting to hear the presentation so we could understand. So thank you for bringing that forward, really good adjustment. The other thing I didn't mention is that, not here to bash what the mayors are doing, or the councillors, or the administrators. It's not easy sometimes to step in those shoes. So, you know, understand that, pass on information. But back to what is really taxation? What does it really cost you in your pocket? So, recently, every year we run an annual meeting in Smooth Rock Falls where we address the population. And I bring statistics. And so it's not my statistics. We engage KPMG, a credible firm, to say, can you give me a comparative financial analysis? How am I doing comparable to Joe, Henry, Bob community? So how am I on debt per household? How am I on taxation per household? And other stuff. So that gives us a comparative analysis. So, and I don't tell them which towns to pick. So when I get the report, I get the report as it is, and I present it to the public. Cochrane was on the report when I presented on November 13th. 2018 figures. And where does he get those figures? It's called an FIR, Financial Information Return. Every year, the municipality by law has to file, the treasurer has to file an FIR to the province, which measures your financial status. So out of that, there's one that is called taxation per residential household. So that means is there's a big, large number, the total numbers in residential dollars that you bring in, and you divide it by the number of households. Cochrane has approximately 2,500 households. The number for the 2018 is 1,871. So let's just keep it simple, $1,800 per residence. So that means that the cost to bring, not water, but roads, ambulance, your recreation, and so on and so forth, is about $1,800 per residence. I won't talk about the commercial, won't talk about even, you know, we'll just stick to that for now. So $1,800. Now, the other question I sometimes ask my constituents is that really expensive? Well, somebody may say here in Cochrane, well, it is expensive. You know, as one speaker talked about, my house, I pay $5,000 worth of taxes, and somebody may say I pay $800. It's because of the value of the home. So the value of the home only determines what share you're going to get, but it's not the true cost to bring the service to your door. We're not talking about water. We're not talking about wastewater, because that is a user fee. Now, $1,800. So if we take 5% of $1,800, it's about $90 per household. Divide it, it's going to come very similar to the statistics that Peter Paulides mentioned, 25 cents. I kind of chuckled the other day, Peter, when I saw your 25 cents. I had just mentioned to my wife and daughter on the way up to the polar bear habitat, I says, it's about $24 and 24 cents and 82, 24 cents and 24.82. Yeah, so anyway, so that's about it. But don't forget, there's also a portion that's covered through the commercial base that we talked about in the industrial base. But $90, 25 cents a day to keep a polar bear habitat that brings more economic impact, credibility, and marketing. So that's the point I really wanted to bring forward. Is it really expensive? So then I go back and I say, what is the cost of a cell? What is the cost of the internet? And what is the cost of, what else do we have at home? Television, satellite, whatever. I've ran several surveys in crowds, and the average that always comes up is $3,600 per year. So let's go through the math. $1,800 per household to get your roads, get your plows, get your garbage picked up, get a beautiful rec center, get a polar bear habitat of the quality we have, and so on and so forth. And for $3,600, you get a cell and the internet. I ask, what is more expensive? So I just leave that sometimes. It's easy to bear down and try to compare and balance everything that's been mentioned tonight, as a CAO, as a mayor, as a councillor, to get your best tax dollars. But really, are we really paying that much for the service we have? Nobody likes increases. But really, when it bears down, is it really that much? Now, the other thing I sometimes hear is that, well, our taxes are high. So let's talk about Cochrane. Cochrane's taxes is a mid-range per household. It's lower than Hearst. Hearst has less debt, but it has debt. 2018 FIR has less debt, but it has a higher tax. Why? It's because it's taxing higher, managing more of their debt. So sometimes a little bit more money in taxes helps you pay. More money you make out of your pocket, out of your personal income, the better chance you have to reduce your loan or whatever. If you're in business, you have a better year, you might try to reduce your debt load. But if you have less money, whether you're in business or at home or as a municipality, and you try to squeeze that dollar and you want to try to get rid of debt or pay for the repairs that are required, you know, we need to understand that we may have to pay a little bit more. But if we don't pay a little bit more, trust me, and I'll quote Mr. Gravel, we're going to blow a spoke off that wheel, and the other spoke's going to blow as well. So I'm suggesting, now that I understand better what we're here for, is I think we should give 1 year minimum to the polar bear habitat to put its plan out. But if we really, really believe, I've stepped it up since this afternoon, I think we should give them 3 years to send a true signal. So that's it.
So it's close to 9, well, it's past 9 o'clock. Unless someone has one really burning desire to speak some more, I will cut it off. Please mingle around. By all means, the communications is not closed. We are, you know, it's a long process for sure. And oh yeah, well, sure, Dr. McFerrin. We'll give the last word to Dr. McFerrin.
Well, thank you very much. Since everybody needs to go, I'll be quick. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Larry McFerrin. I'm a physician here for the last 30 years. And for those who don't know, we are now physicians in Cochrane doing general family practice. We need doctors, and I'm sure we need professionals in other areas too, although I can't speak to that as well. We have good recruitment packages, as was already mentioned, but we need something special. The branding that people have talked about is important to attract people here as opposed to 50, 100, 200 other communities in Northern Ontario who are in exactly the same position we are. Keep the polar bear habitat going. About however many years ago it was, I don't remember, there was a discussion in the community about building this facility that we're in right now. I campaigned to try to get it built, in a small way at least, for the same reason that I want to see the polar bear habitat maintained. Because it's an attraction that gets people here and can keep people here. That's all. Thank you.
So once again, I'd like to thank everybody for coming. I'd like to thank everybody this afternoon for coming. It is an important question, and everyone's input is actually appreciated and valued. So again, if you have more comments, just send them into the town hall or drop off your sheets of paper to Alice Bracey on the way out. We will put it on the public record, and we would also take all that information and hopefully we make a really good informed decision. So absolutely, or send it to me or drop it off. The other thing I just want to mention, as you've seen, we've been filming all this. We did that this afternoon. So we're going to stream this on the website, the town website, sometime tomorrow. I can't give you a definite time because our technician is working really, really late again. So if you have any friends that couldn't make it here, by all means, send them off to the website. Thank you very much. Absolutely.